Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, with a review of the new horror movie, Imaginary, released by Blumhouse. Not to be confused with John Krasinski's shameless ripoff of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends coming out later this year. Plus, I'll have a quick bonus review of Dune Part 2 later in this video. But first, we must suffer.
It was just my imagination.
Imaginary, written and directed by Jeff Wadlow, the twisted mind that gave us the horror version of Fantasy Island, tells the story of Jessica, a successful author and illustrator of children's books who moves into her childhood home because horror movies now are all about moving, I guess. And Jessica's moving in with the brand new family she's married into.
Does it feel being back?
Good. I had such good memories here.
Jessica's husband, Max, is a musician. What kind of musician he is kept entirely ambiguous, and they don't establish that he's a musician until his final scene in the movie, where he's dressed like Johnny Depp at his douchiest going off on a tour with his band. Never to be seen again for the rest of the movie. Probably fucking groupies while his new wife Jessica is watching Max's kids for him. Yeah, Max has two daughters, Taylor and Alice, that Jessica struggles to find a connection with because, you know, these Blumhouse horror movies always have to really be about somebody learning what it means to be a fucking parent or whatever.
Need something happy.
Something happy.
Things take a turn for the frightening, though, when Jessica's stepdaughter Alice makes friends with a stuffed teddy bear named Chauncey. Pussy-ass name for an imaginary friend.
If I can finish my list, Chauncey will take me on a trip to the place he's from.
Alice's behavior, of course, increasingly becomes more unhinged as she's seemingly goaded into doing disturbing things by her imaginary friend Chauncey, drifting further and further away from Jessica in the process. And it soon becomes clear to Alice's stepmother that Chauncey is more than just imaginary. He's real terror beyond imagination. Actually, strike that. This movie, despite its title, is not imaginative at all. It's as cliched as fucking possible. It honestly feels like Jason Blum did a ton of coke while watching Family Guy and decided to greenlight a whole horror movie based on Stewie's fucking teddy bear Rupert. It feels like Blumhouse is entering an era of making horror movies you can watch with a 6-year-old. Blumhouse's output lately has just been childish, insulting fare with next to no scares and no edge. The company's turned into a content mill just pumping out horror movies non-stop without any regard for quality, because they can always fall back on mentioning they produced Get Out when they release any new shit. I liked Get Out, but that movie came out 7 years ago, but Blumhouse keeps pimping it out like it's fresh in anybody's minds at this point, and makes up for any of the other fucking garbage they put out. The funny thing about Blumhouse's new film Imaginary is that it's the rare Blumhouse movie not distributed by Universal. Universal has a first look deal with Blumhouse, which means Universal has first dibs to buy the rights to Blumhouse flicks. And Universal said yes to releasing Night Swim, the killer pool movie, but said no to Imaginary, which was instead released by Lionsgate, which should tell you something about Imaginary's quality right there.
Alice?
Imaginary might be the most unintentionally funny horror movie I've ever seen in a theater. Now, I've seen worse movies like Night Swim, but it's been a while since I've seen a movie this stupid that's so convinced it's smarter than its audience. Imaginary talks down to its audience like it's Jessica's conversations with her stepdaughter Alice.
He's not imaginary. He's not your friend.
It's just kind of insulting how cliched and predictable this movie is, but it still feels the need to over-explain everything and treat its twists as surprising, like it's a requirement to get a lobotomy before watching this flick. Imaginary is very light on anything that could be categorized as horror. It honestly feels like this movie wasn't even intended to be a horror movie, but instead a dark fantasy film for kids. But Blumhouse makes fucking horror movies, and had the script rewritten to follow an extremely formulaic plot.
He's right behind you.
A key part of Blumhouse's formula lately is making PG-13 horror movies so they can get as many people in a theater as possible. So, like I said, Imaginary has very little horror in it until the final act where everything actually happens. Most of the movie is just characters seeing short glimpses of something scary they're not sure they saw, but in order to tide people over, Blumhouse tacks on a character who has something scary happen to them that you could otherwise have cut out of the film. Alice's older sister Taylor has a boy over who wanders their house and comes into contact with Chauncey Bear, who turns gigantic, but it's only for a 1-second jump scare. The boy isn't killed or anything. The movie's just nothing but teases of things that could have happened if it wasn't PG-13, and the film makes up for that with tons of jump scares and fake outs. This is another one of Blumhouse's meme horror movies. A horror movie that's not supposed to be scary, but hopefully people will just watch it ironically for the meme. I mean, with a killer imaginary friend movie, you could have some really creepy, creative, fucked up shit happen, but instead Blumhouse will just show a teddy bear's arm move slightly and call that scary.
Maybe we shouldn't play together anymore, Chauncey. Maybe we shouldn't be friends.
Imaginary also, of course, has an old lady expository character named Gloria, whose one purpose is to keep what little plot moving and explain the film's backstory lore.
Every culture has entities that tether to the young. We call them imaginary friends.
Gloria explains that imaginary friends are actually spirits that bond with little kids to help them grow up, which defeats the purpose of them being imaginary friends, something a kid actually imagines, which is also scarier. Something you just imagine tries to kill you, but no, Blumhouse always has to over-explain shit instead of ironically leaving it to an audience's imagination because it sees all the viewers of its movies as fucking idiots that need everything explained to them. Like the killer pool in Night Swim was built over a magic wishing well? What are you talking about? Blumhouse is a company that specializes in horror movies, but doesn't understand a core tenet of horror. We fear most the things we don't understand. Horror should be spontaneous and without explanation or origin, something that can't be anticipated. It just happens in the moment.
When the connection is severed, the entity becomes enraged.
I'm sure if Blumhouse made the original Halloween, they would have forced John Carpenter to explain Michael killing people on him being possessed by an evil pumpkin ghost or some other bullshit. They would have also had Michael Myers do the floss or some other Fortnite dance. And it would be nothing but young Michael Myers killing people the whole movie. No adult Michael Myers. There's just something scarier about like a kid or something small trying to kill you, something childish trying to kill you. There's just something really fucked up about that, don't you think? I don't really go to see horror movies to see something scary. I just want to see something kind of cute and sort of funny. That's more my kind of thing. I don't really like horror movies. That's the kind of audience that Blumhouse is targeting now.
Chauncey says you're not allowed to play with us.
You might be wondering what actually happens in Imaginary, though. Well, like I said, not much until the end. Chauncey the teddy bear is a bit of a mislead. This isn't really a scary teddy bear movie or even imaginary friend movie. It's more of a knockoff of Stephen King's It. Alice's imaginary friend Chauncey used to be Jessica's when Jessica was a little girl. Supposedly, Alice and Jessica are the only ones that can actually see the teddy bear, though there are some contradictions throughout the rest of the movie. So I don't know what they were really trying to go with this Fight Club twist. But Jessica's father saved his daughter at the cost of his own sanity. Somehow, and Jessica just totally forgot why. This movie's backstory is just a whole lot of bullshit. It doesn't make any sense.
She's lost, but we're gonna find her.
Alice becoming friends with Chauncey eventually leads Alice to being kidnapped by Chauncey and taken to the imaginary world, which is just a really long blue hallway of doors. Very imaginative shit. And it's in this world where Chauncey takes a variety of forms as a giant bear, a Slender Man-looking thing, and yeah, a giant spider straight out of It. And the CGI sometimes made me think I was watching a cutscene from a Sega Dreamcast game. The final act of Imaginary quickly gives up on trying to be a horror movie and makes no attempt to have a satisfying conclusion as the characters do the standard Blumhouse thing of burning their house down with the evil still inside, and the fire department literally arrives in 5 fucking seconds. And the movie, of course, has a sequel hook, but I hope to God that there isn't one.
Just because you stop believing in them doesn't mean they're gone.
Imaginary is not an imaginative movie. It's just an insultingly stupid one that's instantly forgettable. I wrote this review right after coming from the theater and I can barely remember what happened in this fucking movie. Blumhouse is just coasting off of their former glories now. They just don't give a shit anymore. I'm honestly really afraid of how the Lee Winnell Wolfman movie is gonna turn out later this year. I give Imaginary a Lionsgate out of Universal. Alice! Now it's time to give you guys a short review of Dune Part 2, which isn't a horror movie, but I figure there's no harm in me tacking reviews of new non-horror movies onto my reviews of new horror movies. It's better than making a standalone review of that Flash movie or The Batman, and will probably get me less complaints saying that this is no longer a horror channel, so I occasionally have some DC Comics and Scooby-Doo content. Sue me! Anyway, back to Dune. I really enjoyed Denis Villeneuve's first chapter in his series of films adapting Frank Herbert's epic sci-fi book saga. But by design, Dune Part 1 was incomplete. It's in the name. But of course, they didn't market that movie as a Part 1. But even without Part 1 in the title, you could tell the movie is a Part 1. Dune Part 1 mostly just set up the characters of Paul Atreides, his Bene Gesserit mother, the Harkonnens, and the Fremen, the weird rustic future universe they live in, and the core conflict, control over the desert planet Arrakis, and the valuable spice extracted from it.
Without spice, interstellar travel is impossible.
The movie itself didn't have much room for action until the final act, and the first film's climax wasn't very climactic. Dune Part 1 just ends pretty abruptly, but it did leave me wanting more, and I got that, and Dune Part 2, taken on its own, has become one of my favorite movies in quite a while. All of the setup in the first Dune pays off because the sequel is filled with thrilling action sequences while also developing Paul and his supporting characters further. The relationships between Paul and the people he finds himself now leading as a messiah, as a path towards revenge against the people who killed Paul's father.
Your father was a weak man.
The film is also compelling in its exploration of the many ways that religious zealotry and behind-the-scenes politicking decide wars and shape events. The two new Dune movies as a whole made me also appreciate David Lynch's Dune movie from the 80s a lot more, which was a guilty pleasure of mine. I rewatched the original Dune after watching the new Dunes, and now I know what the fuck is happening while watching the original. I had no idea what the plot of the original Dune was supposed to be because David Lynch had to cram 600 pages of story into a 2-hour movie.
Father, the sleeper has awakened!
It's honestly funny comparing Dune Part 2 to the original Dune because character and plot development that takes over an hour in Dune Part 2 happens in a 2-minute scene in David Lynch's Dune.
You shall be known as Usul, which is the strength of the base of the pillar.
We get so much more time to get to know Zendaya's version of Chani as a character in the new movie, while in David Lynch's version, Chani is just Sean Young and fucking Kyle MacLachlan. That's all you need to know.
I am Chani, daughter of Liet. I would not have permitted you to harm my tribe.
Denis Villeneuve has proven you can successfully turn a seemingly unfilmable book like Dune into a movie, though. You just need to take your time with it, and Part 2 has made me start actually reading the original Frank Herbert novel, because I want to know more about the universe of Dune after watching these new movies. I give Dune Part 2 a pain box out of sandworm popcorn bucket. I don't know which one I want to put my dick into more, pain box or the popcorn bucket.
Now do what must be done.
Before I go, I want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor, me. Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested, and I thank you in advance. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. I'd also like to thank these fine folks pledged my shout-out tier on Patreon for all their kind support. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without all their help. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.